Before we begin, please leave a comment, share your thoughts and let us know your lessons learned in the comment section below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. In the heart of Amua, nestled between the rolling hills and misty plains, there is a question that lingers in the wind. It's a question whispered from one generation to the next, like a secret too terrible to speak aloud. The villagers, with their weathered faces and ancient eyes, have pondered it for years. When the wind rustles through the trees at night, bringing with it the scent of forgotten memories and sorrow, they whisper among themselves, what truth could be so terrible that it must be kept behind locked doors? Amua village, a place steeped in tradition and bound by old tales, carries this question like a burden. In the distance, at the farthest edge of the village, stands an old, decaying hut. Its walls are cracked and worn, its roof sun-bleached and crumbling. The door, once sturdy, bears the marks of chains that have long since rusted away. It's a place that the villagers avoid, a place where children are forbidden to play, and even the elders turn their eyes away when they pass by. There, in that forgotten hut, lived a woman. They called her Asen, though her name had faded with time. She had been known by the villagers in a different life, a life full of laughter and light. But that was long ago. Now, she was a shadow in their memories. A cursed woman, locked away behind doors that no one dared to open. She was once beautiful. Her smile had been as bright as the midday sun and her laughter had danced through the village like the song of birds at dawn. Her presence was a beacon, drawing suitors from far and wide, eager to win her heart. She had been the jewel of Amua, admired by everyone who crossed her path. The girls in the village dreamed of being like her, while the young men fought for a chance to earn her favor. But all of that changed the day she married Induka. Induka, a man of wealth and influence, was not a stranger to the village. His name was known, his power respected, yet, there was something unsettling about him. Something hidden beneath the surface that no one dared to question. His eyes, dark and still, spoke of secrets that only he knew. He had built a house of peace, a house of privacy, for his bride, but little did she know, that house would become her prison. The hut was a place of isolation. The door, once a symbol of their love, was now locked. The windows, once wide and welcoming, were sealed tight. The air within that small space grew stale, the silence growing heavier with each passing day. The villagers didn't ask questions. They simply accepted the story that was handed to them, that Asen had lost her mind, that she had been touched by spirits, or that she had gone mad from the weight of her own beauty. It was easier to believe these stories than to confront the truth that lay hidden behind that locked door. Years passed, seasons changed, the harvests came and went, but the door to the hut remained closed, as though time itself had come to a standstill. Asen's voice, once so vibrant, faded into silence. The villagers moved on with their lives, carrying on as though nothing had changed. But behind that door, Asen was trapped in a world of her own. A world where memories of love and joy were slowly being replaced by shadows and whispers. What had happened to her? What truth was so terrible that Induka had locked her away? The villagers didn't know. They were afraid to ask. They were content to live in ignorance, to let the story of the cursed woman fade into the past. But in the quiet corners of Amua, there were those who still remembered her. The elders, who had seen her grow from a young girl into a woman of great beauty, still whispered her name in the dead of night. They remembered the life she had once led, the joy she had brought to their village, and they wondered, as they lay awake in the darkness, what had happened to her. Then, one day, the door creaked open. It wasn't the villagers who freed her. It wasn't even her family. It was fate, or perhaps something darker. Induka, the man who had locked her away, died suddenly. His body was found slumped over his writing desk, his face frozen in a strange, unsettling expression. There was no sign of illness, no sign of injury. His death was as quiet as his life had been. And with his passing, the lock on the hut, the very lock that had held Asen captive for so long, lost its power. Asen stepped out into the daylight for the first time in years. Her skin was pale, her eyes wide and wild from the absence of sunlight. She walked slowly, almost as if she were unsure of the world outside the walls of her prison. The villagers watched in stunned silence. This was no madwoman. This was someone who had survived something unspeakable. And she had not forgotten. She did not scream. She did not cry. She walked with purpose. her eyes fixed ahead, as though she had a mission. The village watched her as she made her way to the house where Induka had once lived. It was there, in the house that had once been a symbol of peace, that she found the truth. And when she uncovered it, everything changed. But what did she find? What truth lay hidden behind the walls of Induka's home? What had he been hiding from her? The answers to these questions would come in time. But for now, all that mattered was that Asen had stepped into the light. She had survived, and she was ready to face the truth, whatever it may be. The story of Asen, the cursed woman of Amua village, had just begun, and the truth, no matter how terrible, was finally going to be revealed. The winds had changed that day, whispering secrets that had been buried for far too long. In the heart of Amua village, something shifted, something that could no longer be ignored. The moment Asen stepped outside the old hut, her past, locked away for so many years, began to unravel in ways no one could have predicted. It was as though the storm had blown open more than just the door, it had torn open the very fabric of the village's history, revealing truths long hidden in the shadows. Asen's feet, though weak from years of confinement, carried her steadily forward. She moved with a purpose, her eyes scanning the horizon like a woman who had been denied the right to see the world for far too long. The villagers stood frozen, as if in awe, unsure whether to call out to her or turn away. She was no longer the same woman they had once known, full of laughter, beauty, and life. No, this was someone changed, hardened by years of isolation, yet with an unmistakable strength burning in her gaze. She didn't speak a word. The silence between her and the villagers stretched like an eternity, with no one daring to break it. There were no questions, no cries of relief, no welcoming gestures, only stares, blank and wide-eyed, as if they had forgotten how to look at her. The woman who had been nothing but a whispered rumor in their lives was now standing before them, flesh and blood. Alive, yet untouched by the warmth of their familiar smiles. Asen's journey was not one of rage or despair. It was a quiet reckoning. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she walked slowly through the village, every step deliberate, as though reclaiming her place in the world. Piece by piece, her first destination was the house that had once been her husband's. The house that had held the answers to the questions she had long buried deep within herself. She walked toward it like a ghost returning to haunt its own past. The villagers watched her every movement, their eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and fear. They knew something had changed, but they couldn't quite understand what. This was no longer the girl they once knew. This was a woman who had seen the worst of what life could offer and yet still stood tall, unwilling to let the weight of her suffering crush her spirit. As Asen reached the house, she stood in front of it for a moment, her fingers grazing the doorframe. The house, once full of life and warmth, was now empty and silent. The windows were darkened, the door ajar, as though it, too, had waited for her to return. There was a feeling in the air, a tension, as though something had been suspended in time, waiting for this very moment to arrive. She stepped inside. The smell of dust and old memories filled the room. The house had been abandoned for years, but it still held echoes of the past. Asen moved through the rooms, each step an emotional journey, each room a chapter of her former life. She entered the study where Induka had spent so many nights, his writing desk covered in papers, his chair pushed back as though he had just left. But there was no one here now. There was only the silence and the memories. Asen's gaze fell upon a small, weathered floorboard. Without hesitation, she knelt down, her fingers tracing the edges of the wood. A soft creak echoed through the room as she pried it loose. Beneath the board, there was something small and heavy. A carved box, its surface decorated with symbols that she didn't recognize. It shimmered in the dim light, the lock gleaming as if it held the secrets of her entire life. Her heart raced. This was it, the truth she had been searching for all these years. The box, once hidden from her view, now lay before her, as though it had been waiting for her to find it. Asen took the box in her hands, feeling the weight of it. The key, she knew, was still around Induka's neck. It was buried with him, but she would retrieve it. She would find the truth, no matter what it took. The journey to the graveyard was long and quiet. The village seemed to hold its breath, watching her every step. No one followed her, no one dared. She was a ghost, walking through the living world, her every movement a testament to her survival. She reached Induka's grave under the cover of darkness. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie light over the earth. She knew what she had to do. The key was still there, tucked inside his shirt, resting against his chest. It was as though he had never left. With trembling hands, Asen retrieved the key, the cold metal heavy against her skin. She had no time to mourn him, no time for anger. There was only the truth, and it was calling to her. She returned to the house, the key in hand, and unlocked the box. Inside, she found a letter. No, not just any letter. It was a letter addressed to her sister, Amaka. The letter revealed everything. Amaka, the sister who had vanished from Asen's life, the sister who had never visited, who had never written, the sister who had turned her back on her in the darkest time of her life. The truth about Amaka, about why she had disappeared, and about the betrayal that had torn their family apart, lay within the pages of that letter. Asen's hands trembled as she read the words, each sentence unraveling the life she had once known. The truth about her marriage, the truth about her sister, the truth about the lies that had kept her locked away for so long. She could hardly breathe as the pieces fell into place. Her sister, Amaka, had been the one who had orchestrated it all. It was she who had convinced Induka to lock her away. It was she who had betrayed her, traded her future for her own rise. She had used Asen as a pawn, her life a sacrifice to secure Amaka's place in the world. And all these years, Asen had believed the lies. She had believed that she was mad, that she was cursed. But now, she understood. The curse was not hers. The curse was the silence, the lies, and the betrayal that had kept her trapped in that hut. Asen stood, the letter in her hands, and the world around her seemed to shift. The village, once her home, now felt like a distant memory. The people, once her neighbors, now felt like strangers. She had been betrayed by the one person she had trusted the most, her own sister. But she would not let it break her. She would not let the years of suffering and silence define her. She had survived, and now, she would make sure the world knew the truth. With the letter clutched tightly in her hands, Asen walked out of the house, her steps firm and purposeful. She was no longer a prisoner. She was free. But the question remained, what would she do with that freedom? How would she confront the truth that had been hidden for so long? And, more importantly, how would she face her sister, the woman who had taken everything from her? The story of Asen's journey was far from over. The truth had been uncovered. But now the real battle would begin. The village of Amua would never be the same again. And neither would Asen. The storm had passed, but a new storm was on the horizon. And this time, it would be one that Asen would not face alone. The night air hung heavy with tension, thick and oppressive as though the world itself was holding its breath. Amua village had never seen anything like this before. Everything was shifting. Everything was changing. The questions that had lingered for years, passed down from one generation to the next, were finally being answered. And the answers were more devastating than anyone could have imagined. Asen stood at the edge of the village, the weight of the truth pressing heavily on her chest. She had uncovered the lies, the betrayals, and the secrets that had kept her locked away for so long. But now, the real question loomed over her like a dark cloud. What would she do with the truth? What would she do with the power she had gained from the unraveling of her past? She could feel the eyes of the village on her, the weight of their stares heavy as they waited for her next move. The storm that had torn open the door of her prison had not yet passed. It was still there, brewing within her, a storm of fury and sorrow, of betrayal and revenge. But as Asen stood there, the letter in her hands, her heart felt something else. It was not anger that coursed through her veins now, but something deeper, something more dangerous, the urge to reclaim her life, her voice, and her place in the world. She had spent years locked away, believing she was cursed, believing she was mad. But now, she understood. The curse had never been hers. The madness had never been hers. It had all been lies. Lies woven by her sister, Amaka. Lies that had been handed down by the people who had turned their backs on her. It was time for that to end. With slow, deliberate steps, Asen made her way back to the village square. The path that once felt so distant now felt like home, her home. The walls of her prison may have been broken, but the strength she had gained from her suffering was unbreakable. As she walked, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves and carrying with it a sense of anticipation. The villagers, who had once ignored her, who had once feared her, now watched her with wide eyes. their faces a mix of confusion and awe. Asen's gaze was fixed ahead. Unwavering. She was no longer the woman who had been locked away in silence. She was no longer the cursed wife. The mad woman in the hut. She was a force, an unstoppable force that had been forged in the fires of betrayal and hardship. And now, she was ready to face the one person who had caused her pain. The one person who had torn her life apart, her sister. Amaka. The village square was bustling as usual. Women carried baskets of fruit. Children ran through the streets. And the men gathered in quiet groups, discussing matters of trade and harvest. But when Asen entered the square, everything stopped. The sounds of the village faded. The chatter died down, and every eye turned toward her. The silence that followed was deafening. They hadn't seen her in years. And now, here she was, alive, standing tall, with the weight of the world in her eyes. She walked toward the center of the square, where the elders often gathered to discuss matters of importance. At the far end of the square, she saw her sister, Amaka, seated on a raised platform, surrounded by attendants. She was regal, poised, the picture of authority and power. Her eyes, however, shifted nervously as Asen approached. For a moment, there was no recognition, no acknowledgement. Amaka looked at her, but it was as though she couldn't see her, as though she had forgotten who Asen was, or perhaps had chosen to forget. Asen stood before her sister, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time in years, she spoke, not with anger, not with venom, but with a calm, unwavering voice that cut through the silence like a knife. Amaka, she said, her voice clear and steady. It's time. Amaka's face twitched. Her gaze flickered nervously, but she said nothing. The air around them seemed to crackle with anticipation, as though the village itself was waiting for something to happen, something to shift. And shift it did. I've lived with your lies long enough. Asen continued, her eyes locked on her sister's. I've suffered in silence, believing your stories, but the truth is here now. And it's time for you to face it. For you to face me. Amaka's eyes darted around, searching for escape, but there was no escape. Not this time. The village had gathered. The people had begun to murmur. And there was nowhere left for her to hide. You thought you could lock me away forever. That the world would forget about me. Asen said, you thought you could bury the truth. But truth has a way of finding the light, no matter how deep you bury it. Amaka stood slowly, her regal composure faltering for the first time. The people of the village watched, their breath held in anticipation. Asen's words had broken through the walls that had been built around them. The walls of silence, the walls of fear. They were listening now. You betrayed me, Asen said, her voice rising. You traded my life for your own rise. You locked me away so that you could take everything from me. You used me, Amaka. You used me as a pawn in your game. But I'm not your pawn anymore. I'm not your prisoner. And I will not let you get away with it. The villagers were watching, their eyes wide with shock. No one had ever dared speak like this before. No one had ever dared confront Amaka in such a way. She was the woman of power, the one everyone feared. But Asen wasn't afraid anymore. She was done being afraid. I have a right to my life. Asen continued. I have a right to my voice. And I will not let you silence me anymore. Amaka's face turned pale. She took a step back, as if unsure of what to do. For the first time, she looked vulnerable. The power she had once commanded seemed to slip through her fingers like sand. Asen held the letter in her hand. The letter that had revealed the truth about Amaka's betrayal. You left me in that hut, locked away like an animal, while you lived your life in luxury. You left me to rot in silence, while you built your empire on lies. But now, the truth is here, and I will make sure the village knows what you did. I will make sure everyone knows who you really are. There was a long silence. The kind that can only come after a storm has passed. The villagers stood motionless, waiting for Amaka's response. But Amaka didn't speak. Instead, she turned, her gaze falling to the ground, unable to meet her sister's eyes. Asen stepped forward, her presence commanding. You've taken everything from me, she said, her voice steady and clear. But I'm taking it back. I'm taking back my life. And I'm taking back the truth. Amaka's eyes flickered with something, a flicker of regret. Perhaps, or fear, but it was too late. The truth had been spoken. The lies had been shattered. And there was no going back. The villagers, who had stood silent for so long, began to murmur among themselves. Whispers of shock, of disbelief, rippled through the crowd. They had always feared Amaka, always seen her as the one who controlled the village, the one who held all the power. But now, they were seeing her for who she really was, a woman who had betrayed her own blood. A woman who had built her life on lies. Asen turned away from her sister, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Let the truth be heard," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "Let everyone know what has happened here. Let them know what betrayal really looks like." And with that, the village of Amua would never be the same again. Asen had come to face the truth, and in doing so, she had set herself free. The shackles that had once bound her were gone. The silence that had kept her locked away was broken. And now, the village would have to confront the truth, whether they were ready for it or not. As Asen walked away, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened, she felt a strange sense of peace. The storm had passed, the truth had been set free, and in its wake, something new was being born. A new dawn was breaking over Amua village, and this time, it was one where the truth would no longer be buried. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this powerful story. Your attention and support mean the world to us. We hope Asen's journey and the truth she uncovered resonated with you, reminding us all of the importance of courage, truth, and the healing that follows after facing our darkest moments. If you enjoyed this tale and would like to hear more captivating stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss out on our latest content. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below and share how this story made you feel or if it reminded you of any personal experiences. Your feedback helps us create even more amazing content for you. Thanks again for being part of our journey. See you in the next story.